And we're back with a very scam-like opening hand from Jesse, looking like the turn one grief coming down already. What do you think you take here, Nathan? Two cards
Yeah,
gone.
so looking at Spike's hand, he has two cookbooks and an Asmo. So fighting over the cookbooks doesn't seem like a horrible idea because without the cookbooks, you can't cast the Asmo. The Nighty Sweet's Revenge is just a little bit too expensive to be relevant at this point in time. And so what I'm thinking about is maybe you just take the two cookbooks and say, yeah, and Jesse sees it too. Your hand doesn't really do anything yet. You need to find an enabler, and the Academy manufacturer is cleanly answered by Lightning Bolt, so Jesse can largely ignore the rest of Spike's hand currently.
Yeah, and we see double cookbook probably being the take here, like you mentioned. Just shutting off the Asmo, not allowing Asmo to come down and get a third copy of the cookbook. I think the Night of Sweet's Revenge, the Academy manufacturer, might be a little bit too expensive if Jesse can get underneath some of those more expensive cards. But she doesn't have a lot of follow-up action to this unless she top decks another Undying Effect for this Fury.
And one thing that we see from Spike's side is if he's able to get a cookbook in play or somehow cast this Asmo, then that suddenly means, well, there's going to be another copy of Underworld Cookbook. The Asmo can start generating food, but we don't have that engine piece with the Daredevil. And so without that, it's really hard for Spike's deck to make enough damage to kill Grief or the Dothy Voidwalker that Jesse just found. And he's in some real trouble right now.
Dothy is a nice one here, adding another 3 points of damage every single turn. Now, Spike's looking like almost a 2-turn clock. Not quite 1 point of damage short, but the lightning bolt that he doesn't know about might change the math a little bit. We're going to see a finale for an Asmo, grab a cookbook. And I
So,
imagine it.
yeah, go ahead.
So, I was just going to say, you think it eats a Fury or a Bolt here. Would you ever want to save the Bolt to go upstairs? Okay, well, there's no red card to pitch.
I'm thinking that at this point, you probably can just attack and think about that decision a little later, just because right now there's no threat of making foods, and worst case, Jesse can at instant speed kill the Asmo. Without that cookbook currently being in play, there's no way she can make Spike can make two foods. So right now, Spike's back is sort of against the wall. What can he really do here? I mean, let's see. He can play a cookbook and he can play the Steel Seeker and just get another blocker down and play. And it looks like he's electing to do that. Maybe making a food on Jesse's turn, and then on his turn, if he gets to survive, he can make another food and threaten to kill something. Is the idea?
Spike just dropped himself down to 7 with that fetch, so we know based on Jesse's hand that Spike is not going to live another turn. Kill one of the blockers into attack with both should just seal up this game, I believe. A
Yeah,
fast start from Jesse here.
this is sort of what we were talking about, where it's like, well, the food deck might have inevitability and the late game might favor the engine deck. In this case, it sort of seems like Jesse just had a really good hand on the play. Did the turn one grief, had a removal spell, and found the Dothy in order to put on more pressure. And Spike only got 2 turns, really. And I mean, on turn 3, he was essentially just dead on board to the lightning bolt.
All right, sideboard time. What do you think Spike's going to bring in here? You see him hovering over the Force of Vigors and the Pithing Needle.
And so bring on Spike's side, he's eyeing these Force of Vigors and Pithing Needle. I wonder if he's thinking about Blood Moon or Stony Silence that we know Jesse has, and just saying, I can't beat either of those cards, even though Force of Vigor isn't good in a fair game. Because your sideboard cards are so potent, I just have to board them in. So I like this idea from Spike. Meanwhile, what do we see on Jesse's side? She elects to go for Stony Silence and Blood Moon, just saying, I want to answer Urza Saga. And of course, Stony Silence shuts down the food engine.
I think we saw a little bit of a what we call combo come in of both Stony Silence and Engineered Explosives. Obviously, they don't work together. Learned that from personal experience one time. But if you have Stony Silence out, you're probably already in good shape. So I don't mind bringing in a little bit of a non-bow because one or the other is going to be good at some point during that game.
Both players having kind of interesting hands here. Spike doesn't have a second land, but with that Gilded Goose and 2 Underworld Cookbooks and the Oval Chase Daredevil, this means that, okay, the engine's going to start every single turn. Spike can discard the Daredevil and make food and then return it to hand. And hopefully he can find something like an Asmo in order to take advantage of all these foods. But Jesse has Ragavan turn 1. That's really nice against Spike's hand, no?
Spike's hand is a little bit land light, and if his goose doesn't survive, he might be in trouble.
Yeah, and at the very worst for Jesse, she can just hit him with Ragavan, and I don't think he can really do much about that. So going to get ahead on mana and like be able to play Fable this turn, potentially, deny Spike of the ability to grind right now, because we see that Jesse doesn't have any removal, but she has so much pressure that, in a turn or two, she's going to be able to dig for an elemental potentially, and Spike needs to find something right now already.
Yeah, this goose is never blocking this Ragavan, so giving Jessie the mana advantage, a little bit of ramp, lets her get out and be a little bit more aggressive in the early turns here. Spike really needs to draw a land. I guess he has the Steel Seeker to help him find lands if he gets to untap and activate Cookbook. We're going to see the Dothy come down and stop this Oval Chase recursion because of the passive Leyline of the Void style effect on Dothy.
And with the third land, we could see Spike play the Manufacturer and immediately generate a ton of value, but unfortunately doesn't find it. So he's just stuck playing the Steel Seeker, trying to make a food right away and hit a land drop, potentially putting it in hand with the ability. Okay, so now that Spike found that, it's looking at least like a game. He can potentially play Academy Manufacturer next turn, and with these cookbooks, start generating a ton of value.
Yeah, it's a little bit reminiscent of our game too, where you were stuck on 2 lands and it was kind of a non-game, but I hope that same thing doesn't happen for Spike. Maybe the Steel Seeker will help him dig him out of this and find land drop number 3 into Knight of Sweet's Revenge or Academy Manufactor and start getting the combo rolling.
One thing that I like that Jesse did last turn is playing that Dothy Voidwalker over using all 3 mana, including the treasure, to play Fable, meant that Spike no longer was able to make a food for free. And that might be a huge factor in this game, because now suddenly activating Cookbook is not free at all. You have to get rid of a real resource as opposed to just recurring that Daredevil every turn.
Right, it also let her hold up the Undying Evil in case Spike had any sort of targeted removal or an Asmo come down and try to kill the Dothy. So I like it. It was a very nice and heads-up play. Not necessarily using the full mana potential of that turn, but it had, better reward.
Okay, so this is the big thing that Spike's deck's trying to do. Get to 4 mana, put a Knight of the Sweet's Revenge in play, and then make a lot of mana with each food that you make further. And with the Academy Manufacturer, that means that every single time you activate the Underworld Cookbook, you get to make a ton of mana and value. And so maybe we can see Spike do something with the Academy Manufacturer plus the Cookbook here.
Nathan, you played a lot of Limited this past weekend. Can you tell us what Knight of Sweet's Revenge does off the top of your head?
Of course. 3 and a green. When it enters, you make a food, and all your foods can tap to add 1 green mana. And then you can pay 7 mana, 5 green at sorcery speed, to give all your creatures plus X, where X is the number of foods you have. So that's like the huge overrun that this deck's trying to achieve. If you have, 4 or 5 foods, okay, your whole team gets buffed that much, and your foods will help activate it.
Seems like a powerful inclusion for this deck that is making tons of food every turn. We're seeing Spike create 3 tokens because of the Academy Manufacturer and probably another 3 more after activating the second cookbook and maybe playing the Urza Saga out or bidding it. It's like we're going to bid
So
it.
it looks like Spike's goal here is, if you can activate the 2 cookbooks with the Steel Seeker and the Academy Manufacturer in play, hopefully your activations allow you to draw a land so that the discard cost doesn't really matter so much. And every single time you do this, you also get the food and the treasure, meaning that you're netting a total of, well, right now we just see him generating 4 mana with the 2 foods and the treasure, allowing him to potentially just play a second Academy Manufacturer out.
And I think he's just going to do that exactly. Actually, he elects to draw a card off the clue token and gets rewarded because he finds an Asmo. That's
Yeah, so
huge.
we didn't see here, but maybe he was able to put this Asmo on the top of his library with the Steel Seeker Scries, so he knew that that was a good incentive to draw with a clue. But either way, it means that in this case, all foods can trade for one of the creatures. So that's going to mean this board is suddenly going to swing massively in Spike's favor.
We might see an undying effect out of Jesse here, but it's not going to matter. So many foods on the side of Spike is going to allow him to remove this Dothy no matter what.
Right. 3 more foods. We see that Spike doesn't have another Underworld cookbook to grab. I'm not sure if this was because one got discarded earlier or just because Spike doesn't have more cookbooks, but not being able to tutor one means, okay, we only get 2 activations as opposed to 3 or even 4.
I wonder if it got milled by the Steel Seeker.
Yeah, that's totally
Yeah.
possible.
Because we saw Spike grab his deck and drag it over to his hand and kind of shake it, be like, "Why don't I have any more cookbooks? This is not fair." And we see the Stony Silence from Jesse here. Do you think it's going to play a big role on this board state?
Wow, that is massive. So with Asmo in play, you can still deal 6 damage because it's Asmo's ability to deal 6 to a creature. So
Right.
this is possibly even a little late here, although it shuts off the tons of mana being generated. One cool thing we can see is the Gilded Goose being activated for 2 mana allows the Academy Manufacturer to trigger again. But we also see a Fury here with the Undying effect. So, wow, huge turn from Jessie, allowing her to swing back and get rid of a lot of the synergies that have been built up.
Yeah, I imagine this is going to kill the Asmo, deal 1 damage to the Steel Seeker, forcing an Asmo activation here. Now you can't kill the Grief because of that Undying effect. So this Grief is coming back no matter what. We're going to see Goblin Shaman being taken out instead and an Undying effect on the Grief shortly. Stony Silence is... You think that Jessie put Stony Silence in her sideboard because she expected Spike to play Scales?
I think so. I mean, I know from my end, I was thinking, well, Spike likes his artifact decks. He likes scales. I'm going to pack some cursed totems in order to hopefully hedge for that. And it seems like Jesse had a similar idea with bringing Stony Silences.
Yeah, I mean, I packed a Hidetsugu and a Kolaghan's Command of my own because I figured Spike was going to be up to some nonsense no matter what.
Yeah, nonsense it looks like. But wow, this was kind of the reason the scam deck is so strong is not only does it have the ability to play like one card, singular cards that are really swingy, but in conjunction with each other, we just saw the entire board get swept. Stony Silence meaning that this mana engine is no longer a thing. And now Spike is just playing 1/3s and 2/3s.
And there's the 2/3 Peregrine took. It's not going to make any foods here, but I guess it is a chump blocker or it can eat the Ragavan in combat. Spike's only
Well,
at 4, though. Oh, I
there's a
forgot about the Gingerbread
gingerbread
Cabin.
cabin.
I actually forgot about that. Yeah. Well, it lets Spike draw a card here.
And while that is extremely spicy, without having the Asmo, this means that there's not an ability to kill this Fury, and so suddenly Spike's in chump block mode for this Fury.
Yeah, the Fury is going to be very, very lethal if it ever comes across. So we're chumping that every single turn here. I don't know if Spike can get out of this. He needs to play
Yeah.
multiple threats in a turn, and it just doesn't seem like that's very feasible with this Stony Silence down right now.
I mean, next turn, Spike can play the Manufacturer, get his second Gingerbread Cabin, and then make a lot of value from that. But without the mana engine online, it's unclear what he's looking for. I mean, he has those 3 Force of Vigors. We saw him mill 1 earlier. But even with those Force of Vigors being found potentially, we don't have a clear way of beating the board.
Yeah, so he's got 2 foods here, not 3. So 1 short of drawing a card with the Took, which means no Force of Vigor, no Beseju this turn. I don't even think he's playing Beseju, right? Because of Gingerbread Cabin?
Right. Gingerbread Cabin having the deck restriction cost of you need to make sure all your lands are forests, except for Urza Saga, which obviously one of the namesake cards of this strategy. But with the Fable untapping, Reflection copying Fury means that this is going to be a lethal attack.
Yeah, and I don't think Spike can do anything about this. 3 attackers coming across, and that is probably that. We see a Blood Moon, but it doesn't
Wow.
matter.
Really quick work. I'm not really sure I expected to see that.